15% of the goals on track, about 40% in progress, and the rest off track. You know, it's been a monumental last 4 years, no matter where you are across the world. You know, the COVID crisis, climate crisis, conflict in recent times, and the cost of capital have really thrown us all collectively off track.
Sanda, how do you get that capital to be allocated to these goals?
It's an interesting one. I think the piece that I'm most optimistic about is that at present there is enough capital in the world to address the financing gap for the SDGs. The challenges, it lies in underinvested or underutilized assets, or it's just not being invested to the optimal to drive the goals forward. So what we need to do, we need to continue to look at the Sustainable Development Goals as an investment opportunity, because they are, and there's massive returns on investment that can be made.
And Kate Dundas, what is the Australian context? I mean, in 2018, that was the last time the Australian government conducted its voluntary national review into the SDGs. I mean, are we due for another one, or is it going to make for depressing reading?
It will make for depressing reading, and we are due another one. But there's also lots of progress happening in Australia. Around about 60% of ASX-listed companies have net zero plans in place. Across the broader business landscape, there's around about 30%. Now that's comparable to the States, it's comparable to Africa and the Middle East. Europe are doing a lot better, there's around 60% of their companies have net zero plans in place. But a net zero plan is not action necessarily. The other big thing that's happening in Australia is the changes and updates to the Corporations Act, which put sustainability at the very heart of the Corporations Act, alongside finance. So corporates now have to report on their climate impacts, or on how climate will impact them, as they do with financial reporting. So that rolls out from January 2025. Many businesses are ready, many are not. So there's likely to be a lot more activity in Australia, at least around climate, in 2025, as some Australian businesses race to catch up.
It's interesting that you talk about the plans that corporates have. I mean, this week we saw a greenwashing case brought against Santos for listing its climate goals, its net zero goals, but without enough action or context on how it was going to get there. Do you think we're going to see more of that?
Yes, yes. I think greenwashing, we're at a moment in time where the rubber's hitting the road. Can corporates actually deliver on what they're saying they can? Are their plans credible? Are they backed by evidence? Are they science aligned? Now, we know more and more year on year about what we need to do when it comes to climate, when it comes to nature, human rights, and the broader gamut across sustainable development. So I think at this transition point, we're going to see a bit of greenwashing and a bit of green hushing, where companies don't actually say what they're doing for fear of greenwashing. But I hope it's a maturity. And then when we pass over and understand that you have to have credible claims, you have to do what you're saying, you can't use broad brush terms like eco-friendly, then we'll actually get to more realistic, actionable delivery when it comes to sustainability.
And on that point, Sanda Ojiambo, what's to stop Australian corporates adopting the SDG logo or badge, putting it on their website, but then not taking very much action? Is there enforcement or sort of oversight of how they approach that?
Well, no, you know, to be honest, there isn't. The SDGs, although they were signed by 193 governments or member states, the idea is that private sector, those who want to act or deliver on the SDGs, do so also through a voluntary, voluntary framework, or certainly under frameworks that are delivered by governments. So nothing to stop them, but I think it's the same concerns around greenwashing or green hushing and credibility. And we know now more than ever, and certainly in advanced economies such as in Australia, I think there's a lot of, either consumer organizations or citizenry or customers that look out for what the truth is. People put their money in brands and companies that are accountable and are authentic. I think it's just important to focus on the fact that sustainability is a journey.
Do you think in a short-term political context, the likes of we do have, 3 yearly elections in Australia, it is hard to sell a long-term journey like sustainability or addressing climate change?
The overall context are always challenging. You've talked about a short-term political context. Statistics tell us the average tenure of a CEO is actually between 4 to 5 years. So we're faced with short-termism all the time. The question that one needs to ask is, am I leading a business for now or for the future? And certainly no CEO wants to lead a business into its death or its end. And so, it behooves business leaders, boards, investors, stakeholders to take that long-term view. And it's not easy because there's lots of pressures for returns, for, stellar results. But I think the fact that we know that our resources are limited, we know that the climate is changing much faster than anticipated, we know that inequalities are growing much faster than anticipated as well, makes us sort of think that we do need to stop and pause. And I think certainly the stop and pause we've had over these last 4 years is also a great point for reflection.
And I want to ask you as well about the political environment, because we know climate change for over a decade has become a political football, and we have just seen nuclear thrown into the mix. Despite not having a nuclear industry in Australia, many have seen that as a distraction as well. Is corporate Australia frustrated with the political talk in Canberra and the lack of, I suppose, clear direction?
Yes, they are. Our businesses are looking for policy certainty. They're looking for commitment from government so they can plan for the longer term. I mean, many of our businesses have supply chains and interests across Europe, so they're looking out of Australia. But the distraction is real. Policy certainty helps to drive change, and flip-flopping around with policy, it doesn't help.
Kate Dundas and Sanda Ojiambo, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.